pick up all the papers, and why do you clean up messes that other people have made? Why do you give your money away? Why do you give your coat away? Why are you always helping everybody else? And here's what he would say. This probably won't make the papers or the news clips, but here's his answer, and I quote, "I need to be like Jesus for the people." I love hearing that story of John over, when he was over at Albertson, someone asked him if he was the most popular person in Lafayette. He said, "No, I'm not." He pulled out a picture of Jesus that he always had in his pocket and said, "He is." And for the last week, we have all gathered around town in offices and grocery stores and parking lots and churches and coffee shops and swapped stories about John, right? We have all done that. And that's a good thing. But the dot that a lot of us can't connect is why. How can one man be this good? He was a good man. Because John has endured some pretty tough stuff in his life, right? His own health, the loss of some family members. A lot of us would have gotten angry and bitter, but John didn't. Some of us might have seen John out on his bike around town over the years and thought, well, you know, the reason he does all this is because he just doesn't know any better. Or he has a disability. And if that's your conclusion, I respectfully say you're wrong. I don't think John had a disability. I think he had a very special ability, right? He had the ability that most church people, and I put myself in that category, we seem to miss or we forget. He was able to connect two things that you don't read in books or hear in church services or from a priest or a preacher. The only person that can teach you this is God. And have it stick. It has to be God. Here's what I think John discovered. Maybe this will put some dots together for you. It's what he lived. The best way to love God is to love people. Take care of one another. You know who taught John that? God. See, John loved all of us, whether he knew our names or not, because he believed with all his heart that God loves all of us. So the reason he did all the things he did is because, and I quote, "I need to be like Jesus for the people, for us." In other words, I need to show people what God's love looks like. Let's just be honest. Why did so many of us see John on a bike and think of Jesus? I mean, his nickname was Jesus on a Bike. Why did so many of us see John helping out people and think of Jesus? Why did so many of us see John smiling and waving at little kids and think of Jesus? Why did so many of us see John serving and cleaning and waving and helping and smiling at anyone he bumped into and think of Jesus? Jesus on a bike. See, we're all over the place on this in this gathering, but if there really was a Jesus, why do so many of us think that Jesus and John have a lot in common? Right? I don't know. Let's ask Jesus. Jesus who said this, "Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this little child, that person is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes a little child like this in my name welcomes me." That sounds like John, doesn't it? Or how about this? "If anyone wants to be first, he must be the very last and the," what's the word? "Servant of all." That sounds like John, doesn't it? Or how about this? "Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends." That sounds like John and Jesus. See, now, I forget who said it, Scott or someone said, you know, John died doing the thing that he loved doing. Serving us. Serving us. He died serving us. See, some of us go to religious buildings all the time, or maybe sometime in our life we used to go to religious buildings, and people like me would stand on stage and teach words that Jesus said, quote Jesus. John didn't say them, he lived them. See, I never heard John preach a sermon. Never. But he lived one every day. Quietly going around town, just loving and serving us. That was his sermon. John never sat in a circle and debated politics or religion or who was worth loving or serving. He just loved and served everybody he ran into that day. While John called Flatirons, community church, his church, I don't think you can put John in a category like that. Well, he was a Lutheran, or he was a Catholic, or he was a Methodist. I think if you would have asked John what he was, I think he would have waved that off like that was just nonsense. He just loved Jesus and tried to follow him. And I say all that to say this, and someone else has already said this. I think the world would be a better place if a lot of us would stop simply reading about Jesus or talking about Jesus and start acting like Jesus. What's that look like? How about John Breaux?